Hi, everybody. Mr. Urso here. I wanted to chat with you briefly about an argument referred to as the common consent argument. This argument is an inductive source of evidence on the question of God's existence. And the reason why this is inductive is because, again, as we learned earlier in our course, inductive reasoning leads us to probability as opposed to deductive reasoning, which leads us to certain evidence or certain proof, so long as our premises within a deductive argument are in fact true. But again, we're not talking about a deductive proof right now. We're talking about an inductive argument, and the argument that we're going to consider right now is called the common consent argument. Again, an argument founded in probability as opposed to certain definite truth. So we'll walk really quickly through it right now, and afterwards I'll have a question or two for you to sort of consider. But going through the argument, here's basically what it is that we're saying. Number one, that believing in God and understanding God as God, the being to whom all reverence and worship is properly due, has been something that has been common to almost all people of every era for as long as human beings have been around on the face of the earth, right? That's a simple sort of, a fact, if you will, right? That's one of the most powerful common denominators that has bound all people together in every place, in every time, in every generation, for as long as people have been people. So then when we accept sort of that the reality or the truth of that first step within the argument, we come to the question being posed in number two. We're asked to consider whether the vast majority of people have been wrong about this idea of God, and this very powerful idea of God, or have they been perhaps right about this most powerful, fundamental reality within their experience? Then we move to point number three, where we get to the idea of plausibility, and hence the fact that this is an inductive argument as opposed to a deductive argument. And step number three asserts that it is more plausible to believe that more people have been right about this than have been wrong about this. So in other words, when we're considering the vast number of people in the world that might have weighed in on this question of God's existence, it's more likely that they've been right about this than that they've been wrong about this. An analogy for this might be if you've ever seen that television show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And one of the lifelines that's sometimes used by the contestants is for them to survey the audience, right? They'll kind of poll the audience. And more often than not, it's not a perfect science here, but more often than not, more people in the audience are right about a question than they are wrong about a question. Hence, it's a lifeline for that person who might be stumped on a particular question. So again, it's based in plausibility, not certain facts or certain truth, but it's more likely that more people would be right about this than perhaps wrong about this. That's sort of the assertion that's being made here. And then we come to the conclusion of the argument. Therefore, it is more plausible to believe that God exists based on common human experience than not. Now, I will also say that the common consent argument can be susceptible to at least two of the logical fallacies that we've studied so far in our course. And that's going to be part of what I'm going to ask you to do in just a moment over here, is consider which logical fallacies this common consent argument might be subject to. With that in mind, just because an argument may be fallacious, right, meaning that it might not be a perfect argument, it might be susceptible to a fallacy that we may have studied, does not necessarily automatically render its conclusion false either. It just means that it's perhaps not the best argument that we can make. However, it doesn't necessarily discount the conclusion that might be drawn. But nonetheless, the common consent argument is an argument that does work for a number of people, considering the question of God's existence. And we're going to see exactly kind of where we wind up on this argument as well.